Hello and welcome to the episode 4 of the Rewild New Jersey podcast. I'm your host, Francesca Mundrick, the founder of Rewild New Jersey Community Cooperative. Joining me today is Tim Fazekas, founder of the Musconetcong Strong platform. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you, Fran.
Super happy to have you here. So I'm looking to dive right into the conversation. I do know from obviously making connections with you and networking, you're newly a part of the Rewild New Jersey network, which is really awesome. Musconetcong Strong is a passion project for you. So I think my first question is, tell me about what motivated you to launch the platform and what the mission of it is.
Sure thing. So I should probably go back to the beginning. My family had a farm on 17 acres in Northwest New Jersey in the Musconetcong Valley. So we were located at the headwaters of Scout Run, which is a tributary of the Musconetcong River. And on that property, we didn't actively farm, but we had woodlots, wetlands, restored meadow areas, heirloom tree species, all the great stuff, all the great ways to grow up exploring. And I think that's what started, my passion for environmentalism, going back to when I was, before I was a teenager. Always felt connected to the landscape on that property. And, that was one of the things where when I started doing some more environmental work in the last decade, I kind of went back to that general geography of Northwest New Jersey and specifically the Musconetcong Valley.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah. And so this brought you to um really wanting to give the land a voice, right? Like that was like ultimately the beginnings of your mission. And I think also what's really unique about you and something that we both share is this idea that the land and that our relationship to the land has stories, right? Like I think that what you're representing and starting to is this value and the storytelling of our emotional connection to and our spiritual connection to the land. Is that part of your mission, and how has the mission kind of formed now as you started to do the work?
For sure. So, Musconetcong Strong is a regional advocacy group. So, we
Mhm.
promote environmental awareness. We have three, we'll call them tenets or 3 points of focus. So, land preservation is the first one, local history, which there's a lot of in Northwest New Jersey, and then connected habitat. So, we're looking to promote wildlife habitat at the same time, preserving the land, not just for people, but for all the other life forms that are there. And
Awesome.
we're using we're trying to incorporate all of this using regional events and we have a Facebook presence, things like that, where we're trying to put the information out there to essentially educate on preservation, history, and wildlife habitat.
Awesome. And I feel that so first of all, obviously your themes, which you outlined really clearly, your three themes obviously echo and mirror the goals of Rewild New Jersey, right? Like this idea that obviously we want to preserve the wild spaces of New Jersey. We want to connect the wild spaces of New Jersey. But not only that, we want to honor people. We want people to be sovereign. We want people to tell their stories. We want people to be connected to their wild spirit and to their culture, right? And the cultural history of New Jersey. In starting to have this platform, which is a year old at this point, it's newly launched.
Yeah, we soft launched earlier this year. So I had been in the environmental space for about the last decade here in New Jersey. We did some work with the opposing the pennies pipeline, which is going back almost 10 years ago. And then this was a more recent iteration of that for Musconetcong Strong.
Interesting. Okay, so that's definitely an interesting also part of the dialogue here regarding your experience with the environmental advocacy community. So with that launch and with some of this background experience and the stories that you're bringing forth and your interest with this platform, you've done a couple of events, you started social media, you started some of the work, and you've gotten involved. So what has that looked like for you as far as achieving some of these goals? Like, how have you found value in some of that process?
Up to this point, I think I've been in support of some other partner organizations, which I'm
Mhm.
perfectly fine with because it's allowing me to get my message out there, which really parallels with their message. Um, Musconetcong Watershed Association is a group that I'm partnered with and trying to support them the best I can. So we just had a nice water themed trivia night at Zigmeister Brewing in Hackettstown. That was really fun. A lot of people were receptive to the message that we were putting out there. There's a group out of Bloomsbury called BCause, or Bloomsbury Coalition Against Warehouse Sprawl. So
Mhm.
I've done a few events with them over the summer, and they're opposing a large warehouse development in the Bloomsbury, New Jersey area, which again is in the Musconetcong watershed, Northwest New Jersey. Um, Obviously, that's an issue that is not just Northwest New Jersey. That's pretty much across the U.S. at this point. But those groups are giving me the opportunity to assist them, and at the same time, promote my message and my platform and branding.
Yeah, which is super valuable. And honestly, just telling the stories and sharing the advocacy is half the battle. And all of these organizations, all of us in the environmental advocacy community, no matter what position you're from or what you're representing, we all ultimately want to share our stories and have voice, to have people be educated and connected. Because more often than not, I feel that people share these ideas and share this kind of spirit, and want to be a part of community that represents that. So I think bouncing off of your feedback there and your three goals, land preservation, cultural preservation, and habitat connectivity, um, you're discussing some of your environmental advocacy work and some of your storytelling on the platform. How do you think that this connects to overall the impacts that you see in the Musconetcong region, right, and impacting the lands that you're speaking of? What are the impacts, and like the key things to flag as far as like if I'm a citizen of New Jersey, right, and I'm unaware of these concepts and I'm unaware of these ideas, what are the impacts and challenges that you feel we face in New Jersey and also in the specifically in the Musconetcong region?
Sure. And I'll speak to this for the Musconetcong Valley, but to reiterate, this is in watersheds in all parts of New Jersey that will face these same threats. I think that to answer your previous question, I think people have become a bit disconnected from their landscapes, and in that process of disconnection, um, you have a type of development that promotes industrialization and warehousing and utility grade solar and things like that were very different than the landscape that presently exists. So I think in seeing that, I'll use the regional towns here, but you can put in your own for reference. So between Phillipsburg and Clinton, New Jersey, Washington, New Jersey, Flemington, New Jersey, there's a lot of development happening right now, and these developments, industrial developments, are severely impacting watersheds. The Musconetcong is a wild and scenic river, so it comes with its own protections, but those protections only go so far. Essentially, the riparian buffer of the stream is where a lot of the protection ends. So I think, as citizens, it's important to understand what kind of developments might be coming, and not get to the point where we say, "Oh my God, it's too late. I didn't know about that," or "I didn't go to that town meeting that is extremely boring and at 8 o'clock at night on a Thursday, and it's inconvenient and it's boring, and people don't want to do these things, but then they cry in their beer when there's a very large development, let's call it, a light industrial facility that's built right next to them, and it's changed their view shed, it's changed their property value in some cases, and these are things that I think to be to really look at what's happening in your community, what is on the radar in your community, and what threats might be coming. And that does take a little bit of digging to find those things. But I think if you connect with a local environmental group, or even just talk to your mayor, it could be as simple as that, just to understand, what the direction is for development in the community that you live.
Yeah, and it's it I have a similar journey to yourself as far as developing Rewild New Jersey as a platform, and many of the things you're discussing are at the heart of it because living in New Jersey, being New Jersey citizens, one of the things that we interact with day to day is losing our wild spaces, like seeing land use change, seeing open space, farmland, and wild space taken. And this is something that is, I think, for most people, considering themselves environmentalists or not, notice that and feel saddened by the loss of land and feel annoyed by it and feel complicated. They see like, oh, look, another McDonald's, like, or they're like, oh, look, another bank. Like people like that's what people say. That's what I say. I'm like, yeah, we really needed that. We really needed to take away, that piece of farmland or that big stand of forest for like more, more development. Certainly, economic development is great. Certainly, the expansion of our state is important, but balancing human activities and prosperity and environmental safeguarding is possible. And for us in New Jersey is a very special stage. It's a very special arena. We have always been at the heart of change, right? Like we were one of the first colonies. We were at the heart of the Industrial Revolution, the very heart of the foundry of the Industrial Revolution. We were the nexus point in early transportation during that time and economic development. And then after World War II, like we were at the center of new interstate highways and suburbia and the expansion of metropolitan areas. And today we are living the context of the American societal system, right? Like we're living in that, and there's many pros to that. Like we've built this great, safe, convenient world where we have great advancement in many different arenas. But my question is, and my journey with Rewild New Jersey is like, what have we lost in the process? Like what is being taken away? And my answer to that is essentially sovereignty, right? Like we are less resilient, we're less self-sufficient. And the thing that we connect on most in your dialogue is disconnection. Like you noted that multiple times. We have a disconnection to our local environments. We have a disconnection to nature because day to day, we just don't need necessarily to like do life ways anymore that include it. And so that's what we need to bring back. We need to bring back this identity that our local spaces are our power. Localism is our power. And that's why protecting local space is our power because those are our resources, right? Do you have feedback on that?
Absolutely. I mean, you
Yeah.
use the word sovereignty, and that's an
Mm-hmm.
interesting word to bring into the dialogue because I think, I'm not saying that we don't need industrial. We obviously do. We need,
Mm.
um, we need land development that's smart. And siting of, some of this infrastructure is, it's going to happen one way or the other. But I think, when you talk about converting productive farmland to an Amazon warehouse, that's a completely different, it's a completely different land type use for that property. And out the door goes food security, goes local farming and things like that, where I think we have to ask the question, what's appropriate for the land type.
Right, right. And it's for me discussing rewilding. So taking those premises and some of that stuff that we've both kind of explored in our thinking. Um, Rewilding is very interesting. There's conservation rewilding, which focuses on the preservation of wilderness, land preservation, habitat connectivity, conserving and reintroducing megafaunas, which are large animals, usually herbivores or carnivores, back into spaces to balance ecosystems. So if we talk about conservation rewilding, that's very heavy on making strengthening biodiversity, restoring nature, strengthening biodiversity, and letting biodiversity drive the bus to create balance, right? Like we're making our ecosystems and our habitats the strongest that they can be. The other half of that coin is people, right? So I started with those premises. The other half is human rewilding, right? Like transforming people to think more about the subjects that we're talking about, to practice lost ways, to connect with our ancestry, to connect with the history of our land, to practice things like foraging, hunting, fishing, like hiking, connection. So all of these things I think wrap together and they make sense to me to apply in communities, right? So community rewilding to me is the culmination of those things. So I feel this is a good point to ask you, especially newly interacting with Rewild New Jersey. Like, what does Rewilding New Jersey mean to you, just as a citizen and as a person who has started their own environmental platform?
Got it. I think that, Jersey is a very small state in the grand scheme of things, and we have a lot going on in a very little space. And, with population density that we have in the state, it brings some additional challenges that we might not have in some of the Western states where there's more wide open space and the ability to, have connected wildlife habitat and, 100-mile long hiking trails and places where people can recreate. So I think we're challenged a little bit in New Jersey to keep all of the interests from competing with one another, because I think you get to the point where you can have a development that completely impacts the ability for people to recreate on that land, for wildlife to cross through that land. And we really need to look at, master plan, regional master plan, I would say, that allows for preservation, but at the same time, doesn't completely discourage development that might be necessary.
Yeah, and so your interpretation is definitely I think representing what you're representing on your platform, which is really looking at the puzzle pieces of New Jersey, right? Like the puzzle piece parcels between the protected areas and the developed areas, and how connectivity and preservation could be more possible. Like that's I feel like what you're echoing. Um, so let me ask you this though, on your platform, interacting with this idea of not only are you representing protections for nature, right, and preservation, you're also echoing this idea again of your own storytelling of your spirit and connection to the land, the value you place on the land, and this idea of cultural heritage, right, and cultural preservation. You have mentioned to me in our discussions regarding social injustice, right? Social injustice in the theme of these topics, right? Um, Applying social injustice in this context, what is that meaning to you, and what has your journey and understanding the social injustice or environmental injustice uh, regarding rewilding and your platform in total and your goals? Like, what does this mean to you?
I think ultimately, you can look at wherever you're located in New Jersey or elsewhere throughout the world. Look at your richest city and look at your poorest city and find out what kind of developments are happening, because you're not going to get the nasty smog producing industrial facilities right next to your richest city. And I think, when you talk about social injustice, they're undervaluing open space and farmland. And when I say they, I mean developers are undervaluing open space farmland, even preserved areas in some instances, and saying, we just think we can make money if we go in and put this type of facility there. We are dealing with a couple local battles where it crosses county lines, and they want to put an industrial facility on one side of the county line, but right over the other side of the river in a different county is the population that's going to bear the brunt of the pollution, the noise, the impact. So ultimately, I think we need to look at that for, as I said, a regional focus, where it's not just, based on the county or the township where that application might be filed, but how will that affect, surrounding areas and other towns. Traffic is a big thing in New Jersey. So, if we're putting in a large facility with, 700 trucks a day, that's going to negatively impact communities that are outside of the township or county where that development occurs. So I think, there's some really great case studies of this, going back to the larger cities in the United States in the earlier part of the 20th century, where they would essentially put factories where the poor people lived. And to be so blunt about it, um, that still occurs today. It's just that that I use that word poor, and it's very subjective. But I think there are landscapes in the state of New Jersey that are undervalued for what they bring to human needs, wildlife needs, things like that.
That last note regarding landscapes in New Jersey are undervalued. That is, that's it. That's what it is. That's what it is. Our land, our history, and oftentimes our people in many of our communities are undervalued. And I think that that's the nexus point for you, for your ideas and for your mission for Musconetcong Strong, between preserving land, creating habitat connectivity, and people. Like, right, like your ideas on cultural preservation is like, uh obviously we want to create a space where nature's thriving, but nature is thriving because it's part of us and it's part of our value, and it's we have stake, right? um Understanding that the landscapes are valuable and that nothing should be undervalued and that no space should be treated as less than. um so that definitely I identify heavily with that note. um that's interesting that over the arc of you doing this platform, that this idea of like social and environmental injustice has confronted you and that you've been more attuned to it. Do you believe that that citizens, obviously you believe that citizens have a right to access nature and have a right to a clean environment? Um, Through your platform, do you believe that you will be community organizing, right? Like obviously you're going to be contributing to environmental advocacy, and you said you have already. Do you think that you're going to create more community organizing for people in the region to hop on board to protect the valley, protect the Musconetcong Valley? Um, right? Like you understand what I'm at, like right? Like are you going to create community organizing?
That's a great question, and I need to draw a parallel here because
Mm,
my platform is just starting. I don't have the followership that some of the larger environmental groups do have, but
mm,
um, I'm going to draw a parallel to the punk rock movement of the late 70s, which was all about um, social justice and things like that, where that was a really effective way to bring people together, and you had a message, but you weren't necessarily beating them over the heads with it
mm,
in an educational way. You were putting the message out there through music or art or culture or things like that. And I think that's just as valid today, where we have a really diverse music scene in New Jersey. My goal is to partner with some of these bands. I'm trying to, potentially set up some shows that would be fundraisers, or to just bring additional awareness,
mm.
to environmental concerns in the area. But I think that, bringing in music, art, and culture is a great way to highlight, what's so great about this place, and why do we want to preserve it. And it's a little different. I think we need a new face of environmentalism, or a different face of environmentalism, where it's not just I know I'm going to make some people mad, but it's not hippies around the campfire all the time. It is definitely the people who really want to appreciate farm to table dinners. It's people who want to go to a hard rock show that there's a message, that's, we're fighting to preserve something here. Let's talk about that for 2 minutes while we're having fun. So, local craft, breweries and cideries and things like that are popping up all over New Jersey. So that's a great thing, and that we're bringing together people in a different way, but ultimately you're promoting that environmental message. You're just not beating them over the head with it.
Yeah, that's a great note. this is a really awesome response, and I know that that the platform is going to flourish, and that your ideas will through your passion, your ideas will be will come to fruition. And I'm super excited to see that, because I agree completely regarding environmentalism and expanding how we understand environmentalism and how people interact with it and are even actionable in it. So you bring in a totally different vibe and these new ideas and these frankly fun ideas, right? These alternative thinkings, is going to be great. So I'm super happy about that. And I'm super happy that you're representing this type of grassroots work.
I
So
think you need that fun, right? Because
yeah.
ultimately, it can't be all doom and gloom. You know what I mean? It can't be the
Mm.
50 pieces of mail a week that you receive that are, polar bears are dying, like that's only effective so long before people just burn out on it. So I think if you bring, you bring fun into it, you bring culture into it. These are all things that can help promote that message in a different way.
Completely. And that is truly, I think, also represented in both of our platforms, Rewild and Musconetcong, this idea of like positivity. Because there is, in my opinion, a lot of apathy in environmentalism, and a lot of obviously negative reinforcement, which is necessary and continues to be necessary. But it doesn't have to always be about that. And so that's one of the most unique things that I feel like you have brought to the table in our networking, is that you wish to also bring the good vibes. Like you want to bring the good vibes, and you want to bring people something different. Because I do 100% wholeheartedly agree with you that the narratives are way too dark and people are looking for something that's way bright, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
And they might
yeah.
not care until their view is gone, and then
Hmm.
it's too late.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So so this has been great. Thank you so much for joining me, Tim, and it's been a great conversation.
Thank you, Fran.
Yeah, it's been lovely to have you for this talk, and you have such a unique platform. Follow Rewild New Jersey Community Cooperative for more of our podcast episodes, as well as more of our media content. And I will see everyone next time. Thanks for joining us.
Take care.